Good afternoon. My name's Steve McGuire. I'm the Paul and Karen Levy Fellow in Campus Freedom here at ACTA, and it's my honor today to introduce our hero of intellectual freedom. Today we will be honoring Professor Carole Hooven, and she will be receiving a tribute from Dr. Luana Maroja, who won the award in 2017. Before proceeding, I'd like to recognize, in addition to Dr. Maroja, we have two other previous winners of the Hero of Intellectual Freedom Award with us here today. We have Jody Shaw and Dr. Eric Smith. If the three of you would please stand. I also need to offer an apology to Dr. Maroja on behalf of ACTA. When we had the privilege of naming her a Hero of Intellectual Freedom, we were just getting this program started, and we didn't give her the proper ceremonial recognition that we now give to our Heroes of Intellectual Freedom. So I was actually not here at ACTA at the time, and so I only have just met her in person today for the first time. But we're looking forward to recognizing you as well today. You'll see that there are two draped easels on the podium next to me. What's that? They're not draped anymore. Okay, well, after last night, that might be a good thing. Okay. I don't have Lori's reflexes, so. That, in addition to introducing your distinguished colleague, Professor Hooven, is why we are delighted you could be with us here today to honor our newest Hero of Intellectual Freedom. Given that this conference is devoted to the Enlightenment and its enduring importance, it is especially appropriate that we recognize today two scientists, two scholars who have stood up for the freedom to follow the science wherever it leads. To paraphrase physicists Max and Hedvig Born, it is the indefatigable pursuit of truth that separates the scientist from the charlatan. It is the indispensable ethic of science. Commitment to the rational pursuit of truth in philosophy, social science, and the natural sciences was and still is the engine of the Enlightenment. And Professors Hooven and Maroja have bravely persevered against the fashions of the day to seek and speak the truth. What you do in your scholarship and teaching is heroism. Hypatia was torn apart by a religiously offended mob. I fear at times that the Twitter, I still won't call it X, mobs look at such moments with envy. Galileo was threatened with the stake. Flames consumed Giordano Bruno not many years before. Albert Einstein's theory of relativity was dismissed by the Nobel Committee as quote-unquote Jewish science. And science in our times is not insulated against the dogma of activists, political opportunists, and craven college administrators. It is too often abandoned by the very scholars who are supposed to pursue and defend it. All of us must stand with scientists like Professor Maroja and Professor Hooven, whose lives are dedicated to that untiring pursuit of truth that is the engine of progress and human flourishing. I mentioned Galileo. One of President Michael Polyakov's less guilty pleasures is combing the internet, looking for ephemera that can illuminate and inspire. He found for each of you a 19th century engraving of Galileo. In presenting these, ACTA honors your vision and courage. We will, to our last breath, defend you from the forces that might seek to obstruct your contributions to the world of knowledge and human progress. Thank you for your courage and for your service to science.
Thank you so much. And I have no words to thank. I wasn't expecting to get anything, so thank you so much. So it is an honor to introduce our hero of this year, our hero of intellectual freedom of this year, Carole Hooven. Many already know Carole for her amazing book, The Story of Testosterone, the hormone that dominates and divides us. And if you haven't read that yet, I highly recommend you to read it. It's very accessible to the general public. You do not have to be a biologist to understand the implications of that book. Many more got to know her as she bravely fought the ideological subversion of biology in our universities. So Carole earned her PhD from Harvard in 2004, and her dissertation focused on sex differences in testosterone. Then, for 20 years, she taught in the Department of Human Evolutionary Biology at Harvard and served as the co-director of undergraduate studies. She received numerous teaching awards, and her Hormones and Behavior class was considered one of the best on campus. Carole now works as an associate in the lab of Steven Pinker, and it's truly an honor to meet her in person and have her here today. Carole's story is the proof that we live in truly unbelievable times. I, as a biologist, would never have predicted that information we take for granted, the things we can see with our own eyes, would now be up for debate at our colleges and universities. For 2 semesters now, I have started asking my class, something I didn't consider doing before because it's so obvious. And this class is an upper-level biology course at Williams College. The question I ask is, how many sexes exist in animals? And this is a clicker question where students can vote on an answer. They vote anonymously, and the results appear on the screen for everybody to see. They can choose between 5 answers. Sexes being binary, male and female. 3, male, female, and intersex. 4, male, female, intersex, hermaphrodite. Over 150 from agender to zoogender, and impossible to tell since sexes are a continuum. To my astonishment, only 10% of upper-level biology students are marking binary, and the majority are actually marking a continuum. So what started a long time ago with a left-wing resistance to acknowledge biological differences between males and females, between the sexes, has now morphed into a rejection of the existence of sexes altogether. And this is the biological version of 2 + 2 = 5. If I could go only 10 years back in time and tell biologists about that, nobody would believe me. So after publishing her fantastic book, Carole gets invited to a Fox and Friends interview. And there the trouble starts. Carole questions the new sacrosanct progressive belief. And like a heretic, she explicitly rejects the sexes are a continuum, insisting that binary sex is in fact a fact of nature, and explaining why that is. She was promptly labeled a transphobe who was making dangerous remarks and interfering with safe spaces for people of all gender identities and sexes. This first accusation on Twitter or X, of course, was there, of course, and it came from a graduate student who identified herself as the director of DEIB, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. To my surprise, I went on to find this original tweet, and to my surprise, all the tweets are still there. Even after this whole thing, she didn't have the courtesy of deleting that. And perhaps she's even using that to brag that she's doing the work. You know, I have some colleagues in my campus that put in their CV the various grievances they filed against other professors as doing the work. Like so many other anonymous, canceled professors, Carole could have taken the easy route She could have issued an apology and continued on with her life. The event would, at some point, be forgotten. But Carole has moral clarity, integrity, and a backbone, and she graciously fought. She was actually very kind in her responses and resistance to all of this throughout, even as she was abandoned by most of her colleagues and administrators. And I have to emphasize, this is not an easy task. As social animals, humans suffer profoundly from social rejection and ostracism. In our evolutionary past, this literally meant death. If you were rejected by your tribe, you were dead. For those of us who have not been canceled, or at least not canceled to that extent, it's hard to imagine what Carole went through. And it's also easy to see how cancellations like this one bring shivers to others on campus, increasing self-censorship and contributing to Harvard's last place in the FIRE, Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, 248 college survey of free speech. In fact, Harvard, for the first time, got a rating of abysmal. They were below 0. And Carole's resistance and bravery did pay off. Carole brought light to the obvious fact that sexes being binary does not take away space from trans people, that the existence of differences between males and females does not imply anything about the dignity of human value of either sex, and that fundamental ideals of truth-seeking and academic freedom should be the guiding values of our universities. Having recently attended a conference from the Society for the Study of Evolution, a society that publicly stated that sexes are more accurately viewed as a continuum. Interestingly, they put an asterisk, and at the bottom they said, of course that doesn't imply gametes, but if it doesn't imply, sexes are gametes, so I was relieved to watch many talks about the evolution of sex determination and sex as a binary. In all cases, there was no doubt. Nobody actually saw sexes as a continuum. In the end, even people who state that 2 + 2 = 5, when they go to the bank, they become math absolutists. So I do have hope that the tide will turn soon. And it's in no small part due to Carole and others that are resisting these, the liberal progressives. I cannot think of anyone who deserves the Hero of Intellectual Freedom title more than Carole, and thank you for exposing the insanity that is happening in our institutions. And I am truly honored to be the one to introduce her, and I cannot thank Carole more for the bravery in defending herself. Congratulations.
Good afternoon. So if anyone has ever heard me on a podcast, I cry a lot. And I cried, I just have to say, we did the Pledge of Allegiance. And I haven't done that since grade school, and I never thought about it. I'm going to start bawling my eyes out. And it meant so much to me just saying those words, and it would not have meant that had I not been through this experience and come to appreciate the rights and freedoms that I have. And Steve and Luana, where did she go? Thank you so much for that introduction. And how do we choose who gets a which one? Okay. So what the title of my talk is the juice worth the squeeze? Okay, so it sounds like most people understand the relevance of those words. And just in case somebody has been had their head in the sand, these were the words spoken in March by Stanford Law DEI Dean, I'm not sure how to pronounce her first name, Tyrian Steinbeck, during what was supposed to be a talk by a conservative federal judge, Kyle Duncan. The students in the room were extraordinarily rude, and he was incredibly polite in response. They were protesting his talk, and it sort of wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't allowed to speak. And this DEI dean came along and stood at the mic and gave what seemed to be a prepared speech. She was fully expecting this to happen. And she kept saying, is the juice worth the squeeze? Some people didn't have any idea what that meant. I think I could figure it out, but the judge evidently didn't really understand it. And she later explained what she meant. Is the juice worth the squeeze is about, quote, the responsibility that comes with freedom of speech. And it's meant to help people, quote, consider not only the benefit of our words, but also the consequences. This sounds reasonable. So here I'm going to focus not on what I think she had in mind, which was the consequences to the people who are so harmed ostensibly from hearing the views, but I am going to talk about the consequences to the speaker. Is the juice worth the squeeze for people who raise their voice, who express their views freely and pay sometimes very high costs? And I think that is an interesting and complex question. So I hope we have time for questions after, because I'm happy to answer any questions that I glossed over. And thanks to Luana for pretty much outlining a big chunk of what actually happened to me. So first, I will provide a little bit of background about me and what the response was to my speech. Then I'm going to talk about the squeeze, which, as Pamela described in her excellent talk, has to do with the consequences of the decision to speak. In many cases, there's no real deliberate decision to speak. It's just something some people do automatically. And then I'm going to talk about the juice. And that is, in this case, what is the value of the words that are spoken to the speaker, to having spoken them, and to the receivers of those words. And I just want to say that I never would have dreamed a couple of years ago that I would be here having, or anywhere like this, having this incredible honor. It's just not where I was coming from. Nobody knew who I was at all. I had a low-level position at, yes, it was Harvard, but I was sort of low on the totem pole. So I just want to thank ACTA, that's hard for me to say, recognizing me for just taking what in retrospect was obviously a big risk, but just felt like the right thing to do. So just a little bit about what I've been doing lately. For instance, I was recently invited by Quillette to write an article on chess. And the reason is because a new ruling came out by FIDE, which is the regulatory body for international tournament chess. And the new regulation is that trans women are not allowed in the female category in chess. So this was a shocker to a lot of people. First of all, that chess has a separate female category. It's not totally clear. We understand in sports, like physical sports, why there are separate categories for males and females, but it raises some interesting questions. Why is there a female category? And why should trans women be excluded? So one of the reasons for that women might not be as good as men is because the pregnant women just drop out when they have their babies, right? And they don't compete as intensely. I'm sorry, I just now said pregnant women. And which implies that only women can get pregnant. And I most sincerely apologize to all of you. I'm sorry. It was certainly not my intention to offend anyone, and offending people is the worst thing that I could do. Okay, those were not my words, but they were actual words spoken in a UCLA medical school by a medical school professor in his class to his students. This does make me want to bawl my eyes out, seriously. This is why I went on to Fox News, because Barry Weiss's Substack, which is now called The Free Press, had an article by the journalist Katie Herzog in July 2021, right when my book came out. And in that article, Katie detailed all of these cases of medical school professors backing away from using clear scientific terms. So I was quoted in the article as saying, like, this is crazy, these were future doctors, let's be sane here. And so that is why Fox and Friends invited me on. So he issued this groveling apology because he decided that the juice was not worth the squeeze to him. I hope it was not because he thought that what he was saying was incorrect. Of course women get pregnant. He did a little calculation and reacted out of fear, which is what most people do. Administrators are reacting out of fear. Faculty are reacting out of fear. As Luana said, this is human nature. This is an adaptation to keep us alive and keep us in a social group and reproducing. And so that is understandable. This behavior on the part of timid speakers and administrators who lack balls or a spine is understandable. So he was afraid, I'm sure, that there would be some sort of investigation or that his reputation would be ruined or that he might lose his job. So the squeeze can entail real damage that can come from holding the line, from saying what you think is true and important. I think most of the people in this room understand that learning what other people think is almost always beneficial, sometimes with very practical and obvious consequences, like when a doctor learns about the human body and, say, sexual reproduction. So, long story short about what happened to me, you already learned some of it in the introduction, but so I'm gonna now just see what I don't wanna repeat too much. Okay, I should say I wrote my book on testosterone and sex differences, not because I really care that much about chess, but that is one example where sex actually is important. And there are interesting reasons that likely have to do with the intersection of inherited biology and culture. And it plays out in really interesting ways in our culture. A lot of people do care a lot about chess, and this is a important question to them. I care more about sexual assault, male aggression, male heroism, fatherhood, little boys who are suffering because society is telling them they're toxic, et cetera, et cetera. And I also care about sex-based rights, like spaces for females exclusively. And for that, we have to know what a male is and what a female is. So at Harvard, like I said, I was never some big shot professor. The students called me professor, but technically I was not a professor. I was a lecturer. The year before I came to Harvard, which I did in my early 30s, I did something completely different before that. I studied chimps in Uganda for almost a year, and that is what convinced me that sex differences in humans are not all about culture. That's not the ultimate driver of human sex differences. We share a lot of sex differences with chimpanzees, and there's no human culture, so no one was going to, and they still have not, and I believe I've had an open mind, no one was going to convince me that all of these sex differences in like sexuality and aggression are ultimately entirely due to culture or that sex is some sort of social construction. So I ended up coming to Harvard for my PhD. I focused on sex differences in cognition, which is part of why I was interested in the chess thing, and in spatial ability specifically, and how testosterone relates to that. I got my PhD in 2004, and I realized I loved teaching. I had been teaching as a graduate student, and I was just really into it, and I wanted to stay at Harvard. So I was able to stay 3 years as a lecturer, and then they hired me as in an administrative position in what is now human evolutionary biology. And so I was able to stay on in a non-tenure track position without a lab. And ultimately, I was co-director of undergraduate studies. So I went on Fox and Friends. I said exactly what Luana said, I said, and then the graduate student director of our internal DEI task force tweeted in her official capacity as representing Harvard and representing my department, accusing me of transphobia and being harmful and dangerous to students, et cetera. Everybody who knows me knows how much I care about my students, and that was part of my reputation. I'm not just saying this like I'm overly empathetic or something, and everyone knows it. So this was just total BS, and everyone knew it. And yet, nobody did anything to say, look, these views do not represent Harvard University. This is a valued member of our community who's made big contributions over the last 20 years. Nobody did anything like that. So I was hurt and felt devalued, and people stopped talking to me. And the graduate student union took out a petition against me, and it was linked to in the Harvard Crimson, and ultimately none of them would agree to serve as my teaching assistant, so I could not teach my lecture. I had a lecture course that was the most popular one in the department almost every year, and I couldn't staff it, so I was unable to teach it, and that was bad. So I ended up feeling disenfranchised, disrespected, undervalued, ostracized. It was extremely difficult emotionally. But then I thought, okay, maybe things are blowing over. But then another thing happened, and this is that the chair of another evolutionary biology department sent an email around in advance of a talk I was supposed to give that essentially discouraged people from attending my talk and saying they were setting up a brave space while I was giving the talk because I'm transphobic. And this was sent by a chair to a listserv with well over 100 people and I had plenty of colleagues and friends in that department. Nobody wrote back to that listserv and said, hey, this shouldn't be happening. So I ended up taking a leave of absence because I just couldn't go into the department because just for my mental health, I was shocked. I just was completely shocked that my long-term friends and colleagues and people who had a lot of power over me were not doing anything to support me. And I lost, I'll tell you later. So as of this past January, I'm 57 years old. I'm officially retired from Harvard. That happened with the help of an attorney. But Steve Pinker, who deserves a huge shout out, was a really big support to me and counselor to me. I've known him since my graduate school days. He gave me an office in his lab and an affiliation with Harvard, so I can at least retain that and be involved to some extent with someone who supports me and doesn't call me names for expressing my views and does far more than that. He's a really strong advocate for academic freedom. I have access to all the journals, which is really important. And I was also hired by the American Enterprise Institute. And so far, they've been wonderful. And I can't wait to get to know more people there. So I just want to pause. I think I have like 5 or 6 minutes left. I just want to pause to recognize some of the people who carried me through this ordeal. Some of the people, there's so many more. And I also want to say that if you know anyone, even if you disagree with them, who is going through anything like this, one little email makes a huge difference. And I cannot name everyone who did that for me. But some people who did more than that, Jeff Flyer, Emily Yaffe, Christina Hoff Summers, Robert George, Harvey Mansfield, Dan Gilbert, Luana Majora, Jerry Coyne, Joshua Katz, Jonathan Rausch, Steve Pinker, Dorian Abbott, Coleman Hughes, Helen Joyce, Abigail Schreier, Kathleen Stock, Julie Bindel, Riley Gaines, Harry Lewis, Greg Lukanioff, and my family and friends. And these are people who came out and in some cases risked their own reputations to a certain degree. And Pamela Peresky here too. And so Joshua Katz in particular, who I know wanted to be here and couldn't, he was amazing in just reaching out to me early on and supporting me. He gave an interview where he summarized his motives for speaking out. And the consequences. And he said, enough is enough. I have to do it, and my life has never been the same. That's how he made his decision. He just got fed up, and he spoke out, and he paid a huge cost. So the squeeze can really hurt. I love teaching and my students, the intellectual and spiritual rewards that come from that, my colleagues, my big office, my title, my speaking opportunities, my salary, all that was great, and all that is gone. I lost my good reputation, at least I felt like I did. In front of the world, I was judged harshly. In newspapers, online newspapers all over the world, literally, called transphobic, told that I'm a bad person, told that I'm on the wrong side of an issue in terms of facts and morality. I'm dangerous to students and dangerous to trans people and just a dangerous person. I lost friends. And I suddenly felt like an outsider for having the wrong views. People I counted on, trusted, worked for, believed in, thought I'd be friends with forever. Sorry. People have had it much worse. I feel a little foolish for getting so upset, but a lot of people had it much worse. Either failed to support me or even attacked me and shunned me, told me to keep my mouth shut. Who were these people that I thought I knew? So that was really hard. It's sort of learning the truth about people you trusted who behaved atrociously. That's been still, that messed with my head. And ultimately, who am I? I felt like I lost myself. And I questioned everything. Am I a bad person? Am I wrong? Am I crazy? Why did thoughtful, smart people who I cared about and trusted turn on me? And I did indeed start to feel like I was losing my grip. So how could the juice be that good, right? Worth all of that pain and loss. So Eric said during his speech, Eric Smith, who won, last year? He noted during his talk, and this really resonated with me and helped me sort of bring everything together, that every bad thing that happened is an opportunity to kind of run towards. When you do what you feel is right and you express yourself in a way that is true to your beliefs and values, it opens up doors and it shows you where you have been and where you might need to make changes in your life to make it a better life for you personally and for, I think, democracy, just to draw a line from the personal to the very general. In facing conflict, in supporting others, in resisting the pressure to conform, we open up opportunities for ourselves and others. Each of those losses was an opportunity for a closer look at my life, who I want to be, what I want to model for others. And I made a lot of changes. And it did involve a lot of depression, I have to say. I had a pretty severe depressive episode, which is not uncommon in people who go through what I went through. But it is that kind of deep soul searching that can be very painful that results in growth. And so I would encourage anyone who's in the same situation to recognize that this is like you touch the hot stove, you pull your hand away. And then you learn from that. You learn what to do in the future and how to make changes. So people hurt you, you move away from those people who hurt you and find better ones to surround you with. If you express your views and you're punished by the institution that claimed Veritas as its core value, which is what I signed up for, which is why I am a scientist, I think this is the way to the truth. You can work to change it from within, or you can get out. I had to get out, literally because I felt like it was ruining me emotionally. You want to be in a place, and you can find a place where you have more freedom to express yourself and do the kind of work that gives your life real meaning. And one other thing that I want to mention, because this has come up now, is that my case was one of the inspirations for the Harvard Council on Academic Freedom. And I'm no longer employed by Harvard, so I shouldn't really be on the council, but I'm right in the middle of it, and I'm very active in it. And someone else mentioned, I think from UNC, how many emails there were right in the middle of the crisis that happened on campus around Israel and Hamas. And I was right in the middle of that at Harvard. And what's interesting is that the people on the council, the minority of faculty members, there's a lot of disagreement about what the mission of a university is, whether we should be promoting certain values or just have sort of strict neutrality, and what the limits of academic freedom are, if we do have to be responsible for our words. So it's interesting and kind of disturbing that these are all still really open questions, even among people who are really strong supporters of academic freedom. So there are some good reasons for not speaking up, like a lack of social support, if you have serious mental health issues, if you just can't do it for other reasons, like financial reasons. I was very lucky that my husband has tenure, so that made me feel like I did have more freedom to speak my mind, and everyone doesn't have that. So everybody who believes what we believe encourages everyone to speak up. But I want to just say there are huge costs, but in so many ways, those costs open the doors to more freedom and living a life of true integrity and honor. I'm trying for that anyway, and I just couldn't do it in where I was. Also, if you freely express your views, I now learned firsthand, because I've been talking about my views publicly and they're controversial, and people are pushing back. And that has been incredible for me intellectually, just to grow in terms of what my beliefs and values are. You're exposing your views to scrutiny. You're able to find out if you're wrong. And it's great to know if you're wrong when you're going around expressing your views publicly, because you can update those views. And when you speak out, you're letting others know that they are not alone. And that is so important, because we need numbers. The more people we have speaking out and the more viewpoint diversity we have, the more it will encourage other people to speak out, because they're not going to feel like they're terrible people holding these, immoral views. So I think that's really important. I will just say, from the pain of this squeeze, I've come to appreciate that I took freedom and democracy for granted, and I really don't anymore. And I feel incredibly lucky. So squeeze away and speak your mind and support others who are doing the same. The juice is sweet. Thank you.